Hey there, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me now. Can I just have a quick thumbs up in the chat window just to let me know we're all good? Fantastic. All right. Well, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. I know these are kind of crazy times for everyone. We've been chatting to lots of educators all around the world, and everyone's kind of scrambling at the moment for resources and just trying to find the best kind of ways to deal with these interesting times, obviously amongst all the obvious health and economic kind of concerns as well. So today we'll be largely looking at kind of the basics of getting up and running with Auralia and Musition. So if you're already a more experienced kind of user, then this session may not be for you. We'll be running through a range of things here. Let's bring up the next page there. I will be running through a variety of kind of different things. If you have questions along the way, I'm sure many of you are familiar with using Zoom, but there's a Q&A little section there where you can type in any questions, and one of my colleagues will hopefully get back to you during the session. If not, we'll certainly follow up afterwards and help you out with any kind of questions or concerns that you may have. Okay, so as I mentioned, here's a brief kind of overview of what we'll be looking at today, just basic kind of setup and getting your students into the programs. Some of you, no doubt, will already kind of be past this stage and be a bit more interested in some of this kind of content down here. We will certainly get to that. We do also have a kind of range of other training videos and resources that you can access that should help out with those particular areas as well. Okay, so first of all, as far as just initially getting set up, you should all pretty much have either already received login details and emails. If you haven't, please get in touch with us. This URL here is your best kind of area for support. And basically here you can download the programs, download the Cloud Edition. You can also recover passwords and also get kind of priority cloud support there as well. So that's a very useful one. I'll just show you quickly what that looks like. So cloud support, so in here, you can see, download the Cloud Edition there, recover your passwords, and grab technical support there. So that's a super useful link for both yourselves and your students once they're enrolled in the programs. Okay, another quick point again, if you're just getting set up, once you do log into one of the programs for the very first time, you will probably most likely be asked to reset your password. And if this happens, I just want you to be aware that the passwords are actually shared across both programs. So if you do update your password for Auralia or Musition, then that updated password will also apply to the other program. Just so you're aware of that, we have some people logging in, changing their password, and then trying to use their original login details in the other program, and that obviously doesn't work. All right, great. So the next point here, adding additional instructors. So it's best if we add them from our end. That way they'll receive any emails with update links if your cloud service gets upgraded to the latest version. There's kind of lots of other kind of benefits of us adding them from our end. So simply just get in touch with us again at that above link there, and email through names and email addresses of any additional instructors who may require access. Okay, now as far as adding your students to the programs, there are a couple of ways to do this. The main one we'll be looking at today is importing your students. If you're lucky enough at your school to have some kind of LMS set up, a learning management system, like Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, etc., then we can integrate with those systems, whereby all your students will be able to log into your LMS and then launch the programs directly from there with results from tasks then flowing back into your LMS gradebook. So there are advantages there. I think most of the schools and people that are joining us today are from high schools in Australia and New Zealand, and you may or may not be running LMS systems. So here you go. But yes, get in touch. That LMS setup is quite simple from our end. We just need to chat to your LMS admin people. It's a pretty quick and easy process. Okay, now as far as importing the students, there are a couple of key things to be aware of here. It's actually quite a quick and easy process, but you do need to kind of have your student data together. I'll just jump over to Auralia so you can see where this is done. So all the management of your students and classes is done under the people area in the software. So at the moment you can see I've just kind of got the one class set up here, which is pretty much the default class where most of your instructors and teachers will live inside of the programs. So the first step, as per our little instructions here, first step is actually to create your classes under people. You can add as many classes as you like, label them however you like. So just click on the little plus button there, new class pops up, and I'm just going to call this Year 7. I can assign a teacher if I want. Obviously, I'm the only one in here at the moment. But let's just add a few more. And so on. Great. So now, as far as adding your students to these classes, we're going to use the import feature, which is accessed from under this little miscellaneous hamburger menu here, import students. Let's click on there. So as soon as you click on there, this little dialog pops up. Now, most importantly, before you even read any of this text, there is a download sample link here. So here you can grab basically a template CSV file, which will open in any kind of spreadsheet program like Microsoft Excel, Numbers, or any number of other kind of spreadsheet-based programs. So downloading that sample will provide a nice template for you to then import your students. As we mentioned here, you don't need to include all of these fields, but some of them are really useful. And I'm just going to talk you through this process now, just so you can see what this looks like. So here is a sample import file that I'm using. And you can see here, I've got a couple of students already set up in here, just so you can see how they're entered into this file. Our good friend Kenny G makes an appearance along with Bark and Stevie Wonder. Okay, so most of the fields are very self-explanatory. Last name, first name, login name. So this is the username that students will use when they log into the program. Now we recommend here that you perhaps use the prefix from your student's email address. So you can see here, Kenny G is what I've used for the student's login name here. JS Bark, the login name, and s.wonder for Stevie's login name. So you can use whatever you want there, but it's quite useful to be able to communicate this information to students after you've imported them. If you can easily say to them, we've got your account set up, you need to log in, your login name will be your email prefix, then that can be an easy way to communicate that to your student. Ultimately, you might choose to use something else that is specific to each student. So perhaps a student ID number or something like that that is specific to each student that they will know immediately. Okay, so the email column, self-explanatory. Again, that's not essential, but this column was highly recommended because it is super useful if students need to recover their passwords or reset their passwords. So we would suggest that you include that one. The classes, so the class names that you include here need to match up exactly with what you have entered in this area. Okay, so by matching those up, when the students are imported into the programs, they will be automatically assigned to those to their classes, and you won't have to kind of pick around and allocate them later. So yes, important that the text that is input here into your CSV file matches exactly the text that you enter under that other class area. Okay, voice type, that's for some of the singing topics. It helps just set a default range for your students. Again, it's not essential. They can update that at a later stage in the software if need be. Now for your password, again, we suggest you just pop in a generic password. So this sample we've given here is music123. This field is case sensitive, so it's important that students are aware of that. And we suggest a minimum of 8 letters or digits for your password here. So by assigning a default password, when you inform students that their accounts are all set up, you essentially just need to provide them with their login name, their default password, and their school code, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. But essentially, when they first log in, they'll be then forced to change their password the very first time. So there are no issues with providing a default kind of password there for the initial setup. Okay, these two fields, Musician 1, Auralia 1, they simply mean that yes, this student needs access to both Auralia and Musician. Set them to 0 in one of the columns if you don't want the student to have access to one of those programs. And then finally, we do have a separate field just for entering student IDs or some kind of external ID that you may need or like to use at some point. All right. So back under here, we've got our, I'll show you the steps again. So we've created our classes, we prepared our CSV file for import, and then we want to import our students. And again, it's under the little hamburger menu here. I would simply choose my file, which I have popped in some random spot on my computer. But essentially, I would choose the CSV file that I've just created. That will then pop up and give me a little preview of how the student data will be imported. You should note there is a checkbox on that form that pops up that says essentially force students to change their passwords the first time they log in. So that's an important one to enable so that then they're forced to move away from that default password of music123 or whatever you select there. One other quick tip, just in regard to your spreadsheet or your CSV file, if you leave blank columns, blank rows rather, that's going to cause import issues, or you'll end up with kind of blank students imported into the program. So yeah, so your data should all just be one large list without any kind of breaks in it, and all your students will get allocated based on the information that you enter into the class field. All right, fantastic. So once you've done that, imported your students, which depending on how many students you're importing may take a little while. Then it's just a matter of notifying your students. So if you do import your student email addresses as part of this process, we can do this really easily for you from our end if you'd like. Just let us know. Alternately, all you need to do is let your students know that, as I mentioned before, their login name, which may be their email prefix, the default password that you have assigned, and also your school code. So by now you should all have received a school code that you're using when you log in. So yeah, again, if you're not aware of that, this link here will help you get in touch with us to recover that. But I would imagine most of you will be well and truly set up and know what your school code is by this stage. Now for students, there are a number of ways for them to access the programs, and we generally recommend that students use the downloaded, installed Windows and Mac apps wherever possible. But if they don't have access to a Mac or Windows computer, they can also log in via Auralia.cloud. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about the differences between the apps and browser access in a moment. And the default login details, that is what we just discussed as far as their login username, default password, and the school code. Okay, so now just in regard to browser access versus the installed apps, as I mentioned, there are a few differences to be aware of. As instructors, teachers, administrators, you should always be using the installed apps to create content, assign content to your students, and administer tasks and check results and all that sort of thing. So the installed Windows Mac apps have all the administration features and all the topics, content, and features of the full programs. Now, for students or anyone accessing the programs via Auralia.cloud, most of the content is there. Not all the topics are there currently, but this does give them the students the flexibility using the programs on, phones, tablets, and other devices that aren't, Windows or Mac-based computers. I'll just give you a quick look at what it looks like at Auralia.cloud, just so you can see the difference there. Just before I do, there are some kind of interesting things, or useful things via this access method. As far as the experience is a little bit more integrated for your Auralia Musician tasks. One thing to be aware of is that courses aren't currently supported via the browser. So if you're wanting to deliver, specific courses, which are basically sequences of lessons followed by, practice drills and then more formal assessments, all combined, they currently have to be delivered using the installed Windows Mac apps. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. Okay, so just to show you the browser access. So this is at Auralia.cloud. And even though the URL is Auralia.cloud, if you have a Musician, Musician also enabled as part of your license, then students can access all of that content there as well. And as I mentioned, under the tasks area here, you will see that in some cases, the AP Music syllabus is probably not that relevant to most of you, but you can see here that students can access both Musician and Auralia tasks side by side, so the theory and the ear training content side by side. Okay. And finally, as I mentioned, students can use either method to connect to your service. It doesn't really matter as long as you are aware of they are aware of the differences in the content that they will get. Again, we have more information on the website just in regard to the content that is more specifically supported in the browser. Okay, so now we'll jump into having a little bit more of a closer look at the content in the programs. And today, again, we'll be mainly looking at like kind of core and fundamentals type content. Before we jump in, just to be super clear for anyone who hasn't used the programs before, Auralia does contain all the ear training content, Musician, all the theory and fundamentals. So the primary stimulus in Auralia is basically always something is played first and the student responds in any number of ways, as opposed to Musician, where something is displayed initially and then the student has to respond. All right, let's jump in, just to give you a quick look at how all this works. So when students come into the program, they are delivered to the home and the practice area. They don't get to see any of these other goodies in the middle here. They are all just for instructors and teachers. And you can see here under the practice area, I have free range kind of practice access here. So actually, let me just check that my audio settings are set up for Zoom. You can turn those annoying sounds off if need be. So for example, if I wanted to jump into, say, interval recognition here, I can choose from any one of the levels that we have provided. Students also can take a lesson if need be. And there's lots of information in here. I can play back examples, jump to specific intervals, and work their way through all those materials as they need to. If students are really good at self-directing, then they can also create a little temporary custom level here under that tool icon. And so in this case, if a student is, say, struggling between identifying the difference between minor thirds and major thirds, they can create a little custom level that is going to include just those two items. As the instructor, you can create and save these kinds of levels through the syllabus area. And if we get time a bit later, we'll have a quick look at that. But just wanted to point that out is a useful resource for students if they are good at self-directing, which may or may not apply depending on your students and the levels that you're teaching at. All right, so let's just jump into one of the levels here, level 3, which is just perfect unisons, 4th, 5th octaves, ascending only, played melodically. Okay, hopefully you're all hearing that system audio. Just let me know in the chat window if you're not. Beautiful, thank you. And so obviously here I can input my answer in a number of ways. I can select it via multiple choice. I can click it in on the on-screen keyboard. You can also enable different input options using a little guitar controller. And we also have a solfege controller as well. So a number of ways students can input their answers. In practice mode, we can set it up so the student gets infinite replays if we like. And I guess most importantly, if the student gets something incorrect, they can then both orally and visually compare their answer with the correct answer. And so on like that. So all the topics start off, well, depending on the topic, you know, assuming no prior knowledge. So for absolute beginners, and then moving through to, you know, a lot more advanced content. Let me jump into just a few other things here. So say we go to scales. So level 3 again, major, harmonic minor, melodic minor scales. And so on. And then obviously as we move into the higher levels here, we're introducing a whole range of other modes. In some cases, symmetrical scales, pentatonic scales, a whole range of things. Basically, the way the programs are set up now, anything that you don't see immediately in the levels, you can add in some way for your students. There are kind of multiple ways to do that, and hopefully we'll have a bit of time to touch base on some of that today. There are also a bunch of singing topics whereby the student can sing their answer in. I won't demonstrate that now because Zoom plays havoc with my mic input, but have a little bit of a play with those. They're quite useful. There are also a whole range of topics that use real audio for playback. So in level 1 here of tonality, it's is it a major or is it a minor excerpt type questions. Step up through the levels. And in many cases, we will get notated feedback as well. So once again, the student can visually and orally reinforce. So I won't spend too much time jumping through all the topics. Just a few other kind of core elements to keep a lookout for. Chord recognition, and then some of the dictation exercises. Again, we deal with things, broken over a few different kind of levels or areas of focus. So, for example, rhythm dictation starts off dealing with just single rhythm elements, so single beats. Yeah, so single beats like that. And then the rhythm element dictation drill then expands upon that and has the student still using beat elements, but grouping them together in larger excerpts. All right, so I'll just click in a few random goodies here. Obviously not my finest work. And here, once again, I can compare my answer with the correct answer. So obviously different elements are introduced at each level there. So that was rhythm element dictation, and then rhythm dictation, which is a more traditional notation based rhythm dictation type drills. Let's just see here. We might try. Let's have a little look at level 10. So many of these levels, again, will use real audio recording. All right, and I'll pop that in there. Again, not my finest work, but you can see here that I have been given partial credit for the rhythmic values that I've entered correctly, and my score up here does reflect that. So all your students' results will be recorded in this manner, so they do get partial credit where it's due. Okay, moving on from there, oral identification of cadences, chord progressions. So again, this starts off at quite a basic level. Level 1, just introducing chords 1 and 5. And then once again, we can visually compare that. Click on the notation to play it back. And so on. So content-wise in here, the chord progressions topic introduces all sorts of diatonic, but largely diatonic content in a really gradual kind of manner. So you can see level 1 was purely 1 and 5 in major keys. Level 2 is 1 and 5 in minor keys. Then we start to introduce the 4 chord, 5, 7, as the levels move on, introducing the 2 chord, and so on. So students can take a really gradual approach to learning all these kind of key concepts. The introduction of inversions is kind of done in a really kind of gradual manner. And then starting to get into 7th chords and chords based off all scale degrees in kind of major and minor tonalities, and so on. So for more advanced students, if you do have students dealing, getting more into chromatic harmony or starting to understand that, advanced progressions introduces applied chords, mixture chords, augmented 6 chords, Neapolitans, all sorts of goodies. So you can certainly extend your more advanced students. All right, before we have a quick look at Musician, I'd just like to jump into a few topics here in the pitch and melody area. So first of all, pitch dictation. So this is essentially melodic dictation, but just using whole notes, semibreves. So this can be great for students as they first, approach melodic dictation, not having to worry about the rhythmic aspect of the dictation. And you'll also find that there are a few different question types in there. We'll skip through a few levels so we can get some others to pop up. So here's an example of another question type. Clicking a few other goodies there, obviously not getting that correct. But yeah, so rather than answering notes on pitches on the staff with this question type, we're entering scale degrees. So as you move through the levels there in pitch dictation, more and more scale degrees are used from the tonality, and often the interval, the largest interval that is used in the exercise also increases. So it gets increasingly more difficult. Okay, and I just want to have a quick look at melodic dictation just so you can see the content in here. Again, the super early levels start off very simply. Like so. But then as you move into the higher levels, you will get some content that is, again, using real audio recordings, and in this case, monophonic diatonic melodies. And then as you move into the higher levels, you start to introduce little bits of chromaticism, the texture changes, so you may end up with some homophonic excerpts. And here we start to increase the length of the melody, plus we introduce simple chromaticism in minor keys, and so on. So there's lots of content in there that you can access for your students regardless of what kind of levels they are at. Okay, just quickly to jump into Musician, just so you can see the key differences there. So here, aside from being blue in something like intervals in Musician, when we jump in here, it's all about reading and writing. So in this case, we have to visually identify the displayed interval. And then once we've submitted our answer, then we can orally reinforce it. So then we can play it back. Okay, in this case, we are entering an ascending perfect fifth. Something like that. So in Musician, all sorts of kind of core fundamental type activities, from basic note reading, scales, intervals, scale degrees. There are also a range of kind of more interactive type topics as well. So here, for example, rhythm tapping. I'll jump into, say, level 3. Here I'm using the space bar to tap the displayed rhythm. And let me just check here that, yes, my audio is set up. Let's jump up a level. So just using the spacebar. If I get a bit creative. So then I should get some nice visual feedback showing, even when I was in time, I was a little bit ahead of the beat, and then things kind of went astray a bit down here. And again, you can see my detailed score reflects how I did there. So again, this level starts off at a very basic, with very basic kind of rhythmic vocabulary. But once you move into the higher levels, I won't embarrass myself trying to do some of these, but there's all sorts of more advanced tuplets and things that that appear. So again, there's a really wide range of content for students, regardless of where they're at in their learning. Okay, just to point out a few other fundamentals here before we move on to looking at some worksheet creation. Key signatures, reading and writing of chords, understanding diatonic chords. In chord progressions in Musician, it is all about visual identification of the chords. So harmonic analysis type questions. And then again, I can play it back. Just jump back to Auralia. Now, just before we move on, just one other quick little tip I just wanted to point out. So currently we've just been working in our complete syllabus here in Auralia, which includes a set of levels that we've created over the years based on feedback and discussions with educators from all around the world. You may like them, you may not like them at all, which is perfectly fine. But just so you're aware, under people here, there are a whole range of syllabi that are available to each class, okay? So you can break this down per class. So at the moment, I just have a complete syllabus turned on for my default class, which is the class that I'm currently living in. But if I had other specific curriculum needs, if I was into jazz or if I was in New South Wales, then I can turn on curriculum-specific syllabi. And what this means is, as a student of that class, next time I go into the practice area, I then have access to levels and content that are mapped more specifically to my curriculum. I also have the option of setting a default syllabus that will appear for my students in that class as well. So if I wanted that South Australian syllabus to be my default, I simply enable that there. And from then on, the first syllabus that students will see when they come into the software, at least the students that are in that class that I assign the syllabus to, will be the South Australian syllabus. So it's just a really good way of laying out curriculum-specific materials for your students. Now, you can, of course, and we won't have time to get into it today, you can, of course, under the syllabus area, really control all that kind of content. You can create your own syllabus materials and map your own curriculum materials within the programs as well. So for many people, that could be as simple as taking our complete syllabus and making a copy of it, and then either editing or changing the levels to suit your specific needs. So that can be a good way to get up and running quickly. Ultimately, you can start from scratch and create your own syllabus as well. We do have, basically for all the things we'll be talking about today, we do have training videos that cover all those various areas. So you'll be able to refer to those, and I'll show you some of the resource links towards the end of this webinar that you can reference to gain access to those. Okay, so the next thing, I'll just pop back to my PDF for a second. We've kind of looked at most of this content. Really quickly, only because it's kind of probably one of the more interesting parts of the programs, or from a customization and content point of view, it's kind of one of the more interesting areas. Just to be aware that in the software, we do have this massive library which contains real audio recordings, scores, and images. And these are all arranged by composer here on the left. So you can find all sorts of goodies here. You can select a piece of media, play it back. You can really easily create little excerpts from within that larger excerpt. And over on the right here, you can see any number of questions that we have created that are attached to that excerpt. And these can range from multiple choice questions, things like this. Let's have a quick look. Questions like that, through to things relating to more specific harmonic devices, recognizing the dominant chord, cadences, tonality, even to basic multiple choice questions where the student has to identify the work, meter recognition, a whole range of things. So I just wanted to make sure you are aware of this area of the software, because it is very powerful, and it's also this kind of dynamic beast as well. So this is always growing and expanding, and you will have access to that expanding content as we release it. The search function is also super powerful. So say if you wanted to look for some harmonic dictation and you wanted something that was a little bit more contemporary, so I'll just type in pop and say some reggae. All right, so here's an example of some audio file, an audio file that we have with a matching bit of notation, and I'll just preview what this question looks like. And so on like that. So there's lots of specific curriculum content in there that you can easily search for. Again, one little tip here: if you do decide that you really like that and would like to use it as part of a worksheet or as part of your syllabus, if you double click on here on the question, this dialog pops up. You don't really need to worry about it, but it does allow you to add a tag here. So if you thought this might be really useful for your year 7s, you might just add a year 7 tag there, so that you can easily find this and assign it to any of your tasks at a later stage. And I'll show you that briefly in a minute. Again, we don't have time to get into it today, but you can import your own audio. You can bring in your own notation from, say, Syllabus or Finale. There's Music XML. We don't support everything those programs do. Otherwise, we would also be a notation program. But yeah, as far as getting existing content into the program, that can be a really useful way to do it. You can also easily manipulate this content once you've got it in here, create smaller excerpts from larger works in a kind of non-destructive way. So just gives you a lot of flexibility, and you can of course create any number of custom questions yourself under the custom using that little plus button there under the questions area. And these can be anything from multiple choice questions to dictation questions to kind of free text questions as well. So there's a whole range of different things you can deliver there. So yes, I didn't want to get distracted by this too much, but I did want to point out there is lots and lots of great stuff in here that you can search specifically for and kind of grab bits of that to insert into your own kind of worksheets or tests for your students. For any teachers who are listening in, teaching things like VCE, it is worth noting that there is lots and lots of great new VCE content in here now. We have the actual exam content and audio from the 2018 exam, 2017 and the 2017 sample exam. So students can essentially you know, with only a few contextual differences, run the exam in a really similar format to what they would actually see in the exam itself. And the 2019 is coming really soon. Okay, let's chat now about creating your own worksheets. As I mentioned, there are lots and lots of things in here, worksheets that you can use straight away. And it is simply a matter of finding something that you might like. So you might find a chords basic test or worksheet in here. If you need to preview it, common to many of the screens in the programs are these little preview buttons. So you can bring up the test, you can have a click through it, and you can just see, you know, if it meets your needs. If it does, you can then turn it on for each of your relevant classes on this side of the software. Similarly, if you decided that was kind of useful, but you wanted to increase the number of questions or add some slightly different content, you can, of course, duplicate it using that replication function there, and then edit it to suit your needs. It's quite quick and easy. Let's click on there. And then I've got my copy of chords basic. I can obviously change the name there and then edit the entries in here. Okay, what we're going to do though is we're going to create a little worksheet from scratch. So I'm going to click on plus, and let's just call this week 1 worksheet. Okay, so I've created it. Again, I can assign it to any relevant classes. I'll turn off my year 11 class. The test group here is kind of useful. So if you are working in a school with lots of different teachers delivering different content, you may want to use this feature to just help, you know, break up your content so it's easier for students to view and find. So you may even want to call this, you know, year 7 worksheets. And you can see over here now on the left, this has just kind of organized my content in a slightly more friendly way, so I can find it, and perhaps other year 7 teachers can also find it. Okay, let's jump in and let's add some entries to our worksheet. So again, I'll click on entries here. And in here, there are a number of different entry types I can create. So again, I'll click plus. And the first entry type I'm going to add is a display text. So I'm just going to copy in welcome. And you can see that's added to my test below. And then I'll click plus again. And this time I'm going to select a level drill. So the level drills draw from any syllabi in the program. So any of the syllabus content that we've looked at before, you can draw from in here. So if I choose my complete syllabus, I can say, great, I'd like to ask 3 questions from the chord recognition topic from level 1, and I can see the content by the description there, major and minor triads. And then of course I can set the number of plays on that. So I'll leave that as 3. And I can obviously set marks, and there are some rounding options and things there as well. So there you can see I've got chord recognition added to my test below. I'll click on plus again, and let's just add one more item. Let's do some intervals. Again, 2 questions from level 4, and set my replays as 3. Again, that is added below. Okay, so an important thing to note is when you do select level drills, the questions that are drawn are all randomly drawn from the syllabus. So you will get a random selection of questions that are drawn from that particular syllabus. So every student will get a different set of questions, but they will be all drawn from the same level of difficulty. Okay, so in contrast to that, I'm now going to select plus, and I'm going to add a library drill. So similar to what we looked at before, this allows us to draw from those specific high quality fixed questions from the library. So I've selected library drill. I'm just going to choose one question for now, select questions. And this is where my tags can come in handy. So I'm going to use that year 7 tag that I added to my reggae question before. So I've searched for that. It's popped up. If I need to preview the question before adding it, I can do that there. But otherwise, I can either double click on it, or I can just click on the arrow there to add it to my worksheet entry. And now you can see we have 4 entries in our worksheet all set up there. One thing to note about the library drill entries as well is that if I like, I can create a little question pool here. So I elected to just add a single question, but if I wanted to, and I still wanted some randomization for my students, I could select, say, 3 questions there that I deemed, that were deemed to be at a similar level. And I could still ask Auralia to just select one question from those 3. So by doing that, I know more specifically the questions that my students will be getting, but they will also, each student will randomly receive one of those questions. So if I'm concerned about students, cheating at home, copying and kind of sharing answers, then that can be a good way to really control the materials, but also provide some randomization. You'll also note that if I was to, well, you won't note, but there is also the option if I add multiple questions there and match the number of questions. So if I added 3 questions and then set the question number setting here to also be 3, I would also have the option of just setting the order of the questions to be randomized as well. So it just adds that extra level of flexibility and randomization if you do have concerns about students cheating. Okay, so I've finished my test. I can obviously add as many entries as I like to that test. And then I'm just going to apply a few settings here. So this is just kind of a worksheet. So I'm going to allow my students to have multiple attempts at it. I'll set that as 3. I'll also allow them to resume the worksheet later if need be, so they don't have to complete it in a single sitting. And probably one of the other main options down here for a worksheet is show feedback after each question. So I have this enabled if I was, say, delivering a more formal exam, then I would probably disable that so that students weren't getting feedback as they submitted each question. Now, one other setting, so I'm not logged into the Cloud Edition here, but one other setting that is essential for you as with the Cloud Edition is this platform setting here. And so this will appear by default for you when you're logged in with your cloud accounts. So this setting, as I mentioned before, certain elements are not available in the browser yet. So when you create a test, if you want it to be available for students to access via auralia.cloud, then you need to make sure you choose this option here, desktop and browser. And you can also click on this little information button to get a list of the topics and also the question types, the library question types that are available via the browser there. So that can just help when you're creating content. So that's a really important setting to be aware of. Otherwise, you may have students logging into the programs via auralia.cloud and saying, I can't see the tests you've assigned to me. And that will be because this setting is just set on desktop. Note that you can also, for existing tests in here, you'll kind of see they're locked off at the moment. But if you were to copy this test and then select desktop and browser, then you could convert that to be desktop and browser. If the tests contain items that are not currently supported in the browser, then they will be automatically removed as part of that process. And you'll get a little pop-up dialog that will let you know that. Now, I do also want to point out that the test creation, all the administration side of things is identical between Auralia and Musition as well. So anything that we're touching base on here in regard to test creation, you can create tests or worksheets in the same way in Musition to test, core theory fundamentals. Okay, so I've created my test. I have set the number of attempts. You can set a time limit for the test if you like, but probably just as useful is setting a time slot. So in here, I may say, great, I'd like this worksheet to be available for the next week. And so I can set my start date, my end date, and times if need be. So what this means for students who are members of any of these 3 classes for which the test is enabled. When they come into the program, they are delivered to home. And here I can see my week 1 worksheet, and it's got a little alarm clock which hopefully alerts them to the fact that it is time sensitive. They click on start and then they are led through the test. So I won't do that now because I still want to make sure we have a bit of time to have a quick look at the reports section. Again, we have training videos that cover all of the administration features and one specifically for test creation available on our website, and I'll show you some links in a moment for that. Okay, finally, let's just have a quick look at the reports. Let me just refer back to our PDF here. One other quick tip for managing tests and courses in the software. So when students, you may have noticed before, when I came in here as a student, I can see lots and lots and lots of different courses and tests. So rather than having students kind of just overwhelmed with the sheer amount of content that is in there, under the tests area, there is a nice little setting tucked away up in this right-hand corner here, where if I want, I can select my class, my Year 7 class, and I can disable all the tests for that class, and then I can add just back in the tests that are relevant to that class. So that just really tidies up that home area so your students aren't kind of just overwhelmed by just the number of things that are there. So you can do that for each of the relevant classes if need be, and you can also apply that same thing for courses. We didn't really get to have a look at those today, but those course options also are super useful just for tidying up that home area for your students. Okay, so reports area here. Again, lots of really useful data for you on your students' progress. One of the really useful reports is just an overall summary. And I'm not sure if I have much data in here at the moment, but if I just wanted to see how student Tim Wilson had been going, say this year, I can select the overall summary report, select myself and this year, and click on view report. And this is what I get. So here I can see a nice breakdown of what this student has done in practice, all the topics they have attempted, how much time they've spent with the programs, when they were last active, number of questions, and obviously their results. So Tim Wilson's not doing so great overall, but that's okay. Okay, and then I get a nice breakdown here of any tests that the student has also done, whether they have actually completed them and submitted them or not, and also results there. So a couple of these ones have some grading pending, which is another feature which we won't get to today, but again, we'll have some training videos on that soon. So in here, of course, with my results, I can print, I can save to PDF. I can also save that data to like a spreadsheet file if need be. So that can be a really useful report just to be aware of. More specifically, coming down to my test results, if I wanted to see how a student had done on a particular test, I can choose just test results, final scores, select all the tests, and again, I won't have much useful information in here at the moment, but I can select my student or I can select a class if I'd like to get just a list of all my students in a given class, and then my date range. And again, I think these ones still have some grading pending, so there's not great data here, but you can see that I get a nice list of the test name, time taken on it, and just any elements that have been graded up to that point. So that can be a really good way just to get specific information back on how students are traveling. There are some really useful filters here as well that are worth knowing about. So if you do give students multiple attempts at a task, you can look at their data via their last attempt. If you just want their best attempt result, then you can do that as well. The other option that is useful down here is the percentage filters. So if I need to identify students that are getting above a certain threshold so that I can then assign them additional materials, I can use that option. And beauty of working at home, dogs barking in the background. I can then easily just get a list of the relevant students who are getting above whatever threshold I set there. Similarly, if need be, I can set a threshold to get a list just of students who are achieving below a certain threshold. So then I can assign, remedial materials to those students. Lots of other report types in here, which I won't go into now, but again, yeah, we have a separate worksheet that kind of deals with those. Not a separate worksheet, a separate training video that will kind of explain those in more detail. Okay, so hopefully we've got to most of your questions today. As I mentioned, if we haven't been able to respond during the webinar to specific questions, we will respond, we'll follow up after the webinar, or you can get in touch there, info@Rising Software, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Some other resources that I just wanted to point out. That link, as I mentioned, is the main one for yourself and your students. If you have any kind of issues, you need to download the Cloud Edition, get tech support, or reset passwords. Training videos on our website. We have a private Facebook group, which may be of interest. This is not because we love Facebook, but it has become quite a useful growing resource for educators to just be able to share, any kind of questions, issues they're having with the programs, and just kind of discuss best practice for actually implementing the programs in their own schools and integrating them within their own kind of curriculum needs. So hopefully that may be of some interest and use to some of you. More training videos via our YouTube channel. We will be posting a recording of this webinar there as well. So if you need to review it or share it with other teachers, other staff members, you can also do that there. Including, yes, the main videos we have for importing students and setting up custom worksheets and exams. So that just about concludes everything I had planned for today. I hope it's kind of been of use. And as I mentioned, please get in touch with any questions, and we'll help you out as quickly as we can. I guess for many of you, probably the next step will be just making sure you've got your students all set up in the program. So if you're having any issues importing them, getting them into the programs, please let us know. We can certainly help out with that, and hopefully that training video can also assist with that process. So be safe, take care. We will probably be doing some other webinars in the coming weeks, as well as letting you know about recordings of some of the previous webinars we've done as well. So yeah, stay in touch. Best of luck, and we will hopefully chat to you soon. Thanks very much. See you.